Welcome back. While many of us enjoy staying connected with the help of social media apps like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, excessive use can lead to a much darker path, leaving many users ultimately feeling even more isolated. Could teens be at more risk? Here to discuss is Dr. Hina Talib, adolescent medicine specialist at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. Dr. Talib, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, as years go by, we see social media become a larger part of our lives. Can you explain the harmful effects the medium is known to have on teens? The Wall Street Journal recently released an article that states Facebook is aware of the negative impact their platform has on teens.
Yeah, so social media gives teens an opportunity to find connections, to find people who reflect themselves and their interests, to even get more information, like health information as well. So it certainly has some benefits. But for some teens, excessive social media use, especially, can be associated with some harms, paradoxically, even feeling lonely and feeling less connected, as well as for some teens feeling depressed and feeling anxious. And so, certainly, there can be some harms as well.
And how do we see this play out differently with adults versus teens?
So, teenagers are in a very sensitive developmental phase, especially our early teenagers, like our middle schoolers. They kind of naturally go through a period where they feel self critical and they may have low self esteem. And part of this is because their bodies are changing and maybe at different like in different ways than their friends around them, and there's a bit of comparison that happens when these sort of major changes are happening. And so when you overlap kind of this natural, developmental, actually normal part of feeling a little more sensitive about yourself with social media, it is sort of or it can be a recipe for potential extra harm.
And why do you think teenage girls are being most notably harmed from the effect of social media?
Right. So, I think that we know that teenage girls spend 2 or more hours a day interacting with social media. And we know that teens as young as age 11 are starting to use social media. And so, with girls especially, unfortunately, there are a lot of negative influences on social media that cater to diet culture and to sort of changing the way you look, changing your features, like filters do this. And teens also, like we were talking before, they compare each other. And so social comparison in real life is hard enough. Social comparison on an app or a platform that is very photographic, it can be extra hard for sure. And for these reasons, for teen girls especially, we have, well, it's been reported by the platform itself that it can be especially tricky for them to navigate.
Do you think these apps are responsible at all, or is it more a societal issue?
I think we are all responsible. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that we all have to work together. So this means pediatricians, schools, families, communities. We all have to work together to help our teens develop a sense of digital well-being, and to feel protected. And so this is a tall order. Certainly, the platforms have accountability, and hopefully, all of the media attention of late will help propel some of that accountability. But I do think that there's a role for all of us to kind of step in, talk about digital well-being. What does that mean? What does it mean to have boundaries? What does it mean to be a user? What a weird word that is for somebody who interacts with social media. Why do we use that word and what does it mean?
So let's talk screen time. Are there any tips you can give parents to manage their teen screen time?
Yes. So I would love to offer some tips here. I think that the most important one is that we really need to take stock of our own use as parents. Teens are really good at calling out BS or calling out hypocrites. So we really need to model behavior ourselves, and the way we can do that is to limit our own use, cut it out before bedtime, and help create spaces in our lives where we put our phone down. So if we are able to do this, I think we would be able to help our teens to do this. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's so, if you can delay when your teen starts using social media, so this is kind of prevention before they get into it. If you can wait until 13 or so, that would be we have found that is actually really helpful. In reality, it's really hard to do unless you're with a group of other parents or community members who all also agree to do it. Because when a couple teens start, then it becomes really hard for the others not to want it, for fear of missing out, which is very real when it comes to social media. So we have to, so say you're already there, your teen is already on social media, we can still have conversations. And this is a perfect time this is a great sort of opener into having this conversation because it's in the news. So seize this opportunity to ask, hey, have you heard about the news related to Instagram and mental effects on kids? What do you think about that? And so you can have these conversations about how these platforms may or may not be in our best interest. I think teaching our teens to have healthy boundaries, you can say, just like it's important to have healthy boundaries with people in our lives, it's helpful to have boundaries with tech in our lives. We want to be using these platforms. We don't want them to be using us. And so teaching teens about the privacy, whatever you sort of are agreeing to when you're using these apps, teaching them to be critical, be very critical of what you're seeing. Is it bias? Is it just fake? Is it not reality? Are they trying to sell you something? So if we can help, for ourselves and for our teens, kind of like teach them to be very critical of these apps, that I think can go a long way for sure. And, finally, some of these apps actually have some tools that can be helpful, like the time setters. I have found that I feel like I spend too much time on social media for sure, and I love using those the time limits. It gives you an alert when your time is up, and it reminds you. It sort of like wakes you up a little bit. It's like a mindful moment to, hey, you reached your limit. Maybe you should think about doing something else. And I think that it also shares how long you've been on the app, and I have found that teens, I mean, they're shocked to learn how long they've actually been on an app per day.
TikTok also rolled out some features to help teens. The new feature will direct users to support, such as crisis text line if they search for the term suicide, well-being guides for those struggling with eating disorders. With the TikTok being popular among teens, is this a step in the right direction?
I commend any platform that makes it easier to access or amplifies, authoritative, really informed resources that can reach adolescents. TikTok has a lot of power. A lot of our adolescents are there. There are a lot of pediatricians and OBGYNs who do amazing work who are there. And of course, organizations that have crisis lines, if that information can be sort of overshared on those platforms where teens are, it's another way of reaching teens. And I fully commend that, and I'd love to see more of it.
So we mentioned, like how you view your body and things like that. And, social media has positively changed the lives of everyday people. Do you think striving for that type of success could also be harmful for both adults and teens?
I think it's complicated. I think that for some people, social media does indeed make them feel worse. And I think, taking a moment to just sort of talk about, well, how does this make me feel? Is it bringing me joy, or does it make me feel worse about myself or about something that I'm doing in my life or not doing in my life? And we really need to, then it's sort of easier to say, well, if it's not making me feel good, or it's making me feel sad, left out, like I'm not enough, or my body isn't enough in some way, then once you've kind of noted that feeling and said it out loud, I think it's easier to put the boundary up and move away from it. So whether you're an adult, a teenager, or a child, I think we all need to talk about a lot more about digital well-being, and kind of reading media and like engaging with media in a different, more critical way.
So, according to BuzzFeed, Instagram is in the process of making a version of the app for kids. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I would love to see Instagram sort of respond to the news reports that have come out related to research that they've already done. It's always good to do research. And heck, I know that a lot of pediatricians like myself and other folks who are interested in media's effects on teens would love to help and be part of this research. But I think focusing on sort of making what's already there better is where I would see the next best step, as opposed to going into younger ages, because we already know that there are some red flags that need to be addressed. So my thought would be, why don't we focus there before we start to look into younger children who may have a whole host of different issues related to how they use media.
And lastly, I've seen a rise in TikTok popularity within the last year. Do you think COVID has exacerbated the problem?
I think that social media for a lot of teens was a lifeline during these hard months, these 19 months. I think that screen time in general, went through the roof because we were using it for so many different aspects of our life, that we weren't actually even before. So for education, for good things like working out videos and things like that. So certainly there was an impact of the pandemic on everybody's screen time use, including social media. I think that it had a role, and for some teens, it actually had a helpful role. And so it's important to take a balanced look at the teen in front of you. How is my kid doing with social media? Are they on this so often that they're not doing things in real life, like they're not getting through their days, they're not getting through homework, or are we in a more balanced situation? So I think it is important to sort of look at the teen in front of you, and make a decision together as a family. Take stock together as a family. Be critical together as a family. How are we all doing with this? And especially since it's in the news right now, perfect time to talk about it.
Dr. Talib, thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome.
We'll be right back with more Open BXRX Tuesday.